Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar where we will be going through the process for applying for centre determined grades for essential skills qualifications in Wales. My name is Amanda Kelly. I'm the Industry Manager for Maths, English and Employability, and I'm joined this afternoon by Anne Harrod and Catherine, who will be supporting me with fielding the questions. So we've left the question box switched on. So please do type your queries in the question box. We will try and have a look at these at the end, time permitting. But what we are doing is taking these your questions offline and making sure that we'll include them in an FAQ document to support the process guides that we already have. So let's get started. So I'm planning just to do a quick overview of the key dates, discuss the eligibility booking process in Walled Garden, then explain what happens next, the eligibility status, do a little bit of a coverage of internal quality assurance, then we'll look at what will happen when you actually submit your centre determined grades, and what we will be expecting to do as part of our external quality assurance process, and a quick reminder of how the results release is going to happen. Just to warn you, I haven't written a script for today's webinar, so I'll apologise in advance for any ums and ahs. So key dates. At the moment, we have two assessment windows that we have available. So the first one is currently open for eligibility submission now, was open on the 24th, and that remains open until the 28th of May. So the first stage is to submit into Walled Garden the candidates that you wish to make a centre determined grade for. The window for submitting your actual grades will open on the 4th of June, and that closes on the 25th of June, and the results release is on the 23rd of July. We have a further assessment window, which allows for results release by the end of August. And we also have in mind a further window, and we will confirm the dates on that closer to the time. So let's have a look at eligibility booking, and I'm sure that some of you will have already dabbled a little bit and had a look at this. But just to be clear, where assessments can be delivered as usual or in line with the adaptations that we've produced, we have a guidance document, and actually doing is busy tidying up those documents and making them clear the difference between the green one, which is the adaptations of existing assessments, and then a new document that we're releasing, which will cover the centre determined grades for all of the essential skills qualifications. And centre determined grades are for delivery where it's not been possible to deliver an adapted arrangement. Now in Wales, we're calling them centre determined grades because that is the language that Qualification Wales and the Asset Management Group have used. However, you will see in places the expression teacher assessed grades, or TAG, that is the name of the process that's being used in England for our functional skills qualifications, but it also applies to ESOL skills for life. So should you be delivering our ESOL qualifications, you will see the term TAG rather than CDG. Now, centre determined grades are applicable for all learners who've completed teaching and learning and are considered to be functioning at the required level, and whom are due to complete their essential skills qualification before the 31st of August this year. So the guidance for this process is in a blue document, which is available from the nation's COVID-19 page, and that's what I'm actually going to cover in this session. We're going to add another guidance document to the website, and that also will have a blue cover, and that will just be more detail around the evidence requirements for the centre determined grades, and we will send out an alert as soon as that becomes available. So in order to make an so I won't read the programme of study numbers for essential skills, but basically you will make a judgment qualification, and that judgment must be based on trusted evidence. And where you have evidence that the candidate meets or exceeds a pass standard, then you can apply for a centre-determined grade. So what I'm saying here is that there is no requirement to submit fail grades. I know that last year, when everyone was doing the CAG process, that you were required to enter both pass and fail grades. This year, we're only looking for Essential Skills Wales, we're only looking for people who have, in your opinion, would be eligible to pass the qualification. And there are 2 steps as part of this Essentials eligibility submission. It's the eligibility booking for individual candidates on the walled garden, and there's also a centre declaration, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So to submit your eligibility booking, you'll log into walled garden with your usual account, and in the catalogue you'll select place order, and you will see a new tab on the far right which is called Eligibility Booking. So you will need to complete the information fields in this tab. If you are only associated with one centre number, that will appear automatically in the drop-down list. Otherwise, for our centres that have a number of different subsites, you will need to select the relevant centre number that you are submitting eligibility bookings for. We would ask you to check the date in the submission window. It will show the current window right up until we get within a week of the next window, in which case it then moves on to the next window. So it's important to make sure that you select the right window for your eligibility booking. And we ask you to give each booking a reference number so that you can locate individual candidates by their eligibility booking. So you will then need to select which assessment you are making the booking for, because the centre determined grades are submitted on a assessment code basis. Now I've put these all the codes here on this slide because for essential communication and essential application of number skills levels 1, 2 and 3, the code you will be using will be the confirmatory test code, not the controlled task code. And in addition, the test code that we give you is the one that relates to an evolved booking, not for a paper booking. So even if you would normally deliver your confirmatory tests on paper, for the eligibility booking, you will use the booking number for the evolved test. This was to reduce the number of possible variations in the eligibility booking process. So hopefully that makes sense. For digital literacy and employability, the codes you will get will be the ones that relate to the usual results entry booking for those qualifications. This is a screenshot of the eligibility booking screen. I apologise because it's showing functional skills codes, but I couldn't get onto the system to take a further screenshot. So you can see the centre number is on the left there, and the assessment window number is immediately below it. And then there's the box for your internal reference, and that is really your internal reference to allow you to find a specific group of learners. So the next thing, having created the booking, is to add learners or candidates to that booking. And there are 4 ways for you to actually search for your learners. So you can use the candidate details field, such as their name or their date of birth. You just enter the name in and click search, and it will give you a list. If there's more than one learner with that name, it will give you a list of learners, and then you select the one that you're looking for and you click add to booking. Alternatively, if you uploaded the candidates in a cohort and you have a cohort name, you can select a cohort title from the drop-down box and then select the candidate you are adding. Now, you'll notice I'm saying candidate because you have to add your candidates one at a time. You can also use their enrolment number or their ULN. So these are 4 different ways to actually find learners who you have registered for the qualification. And on the next screen, I've got an example of the candidate details field. So this, for example, in this screen, we've put in the surname Smith, and rather unusually, we've only got one Smith at this centre. So you then tick the select box over on the left-hand side and then click on the red button that says Add to Booking. So once you've clicked Add to Booking, you'll get a dialog box that says, do you want to add another candidate? And you just click yes if you want to add more, or no if you were only submitting one candidate. You can repeat this process and add more candidates until you reach the maximum number of learners. So the maximum number of learners for a booking is 100, but that's not a reason for alarm, because what you can do is when you submit that booking with 100 learners on, you can create a further booking. So just going on, what we do suggest you do is use a cohort system to submit groups of candidates for eligibility, because that will allow you to then come back and revisit those cohorts to put in their results later on. So the maximum number of candidates in a submission or a cohort is 100, but you can submit as many cohorts as you need or want in each window. At the moment, actually, I wrote this before it happened. I said that you had to commit each submission in one sitting because it wasn't possible to save progress. I understand as of this week, the save submission functionality now works. So if you're you get halfway through creating an eligibility booking and then get called away, as long as you click on save progress, you'll be able to come back and carry on with that particular booking. So there's a couple of advantages to creating cohorts. If you pull together a cohort, for example, for reading and writing, you could then use that same cohort to create an eligibility booking for application of number without having to go through and add them all singly again. And when you come to submit the grades at the next stage, you can use that cohort to pull all those learners through so you can enter their results. So once you've created a booking and you've added all the candidates, you give your cohort a name so that you can then come back and use it again, and click on the red button that says create. And once you've done that, you then submit your booking. You should see a prompt dialog box asking you if you're sure you want to submit, so you click on OK. You then get a confirmation of successful submission, something like thanks for your submission, and it will give you a booking request number, so make sure you take account of that. On a rare occasion, you might get a message that says there was an issue submitting the booking, and then what it will give you is a series of a list of potential problems with your booking, so you can go back and review it. So I mentioned a centre declaration. So this is called the Centre Policy and Approach Form, CPA, and there is one form in particular for essential skills, which is available on the COVID-19 page. And this has to accompany your eligibility booking, because this gives further detail about the individual learners, because you will notice that in that eligibility booking, there was no requirement to say why you were submitting those learners. So you must provide some detail around your process for determining determined grades, some detail about the supporting evidence that you're using and how you will run your internal quality assurance process. And the form covers the approach for all the essential skills qualifications being delivered, and it must be completed by either the head of centre or someone with a designated authority to act on their behalf. And this is a statement of compliance with the requirements put on us by the regulator. So it demonstrates the process you're using to determine the grades, how you will ensure a sufficient range and appropriate use of evidence. It will tell us about your robust IQA procedures and standardization, particularly a standardization around the understanding of what a pass grade looks like. And it'll also tell us how you intend to retain the evidence for the future. Now, you only need to complete this form once in your first assessment window, so you don't need to repeat this form for subsequent windows. It is a once only form. Now, it is possible that when you submit this form, our internal quality assurance process will examine that form and look at the eligibility bookings that you've made on Walled Garden, and it may be that we have to come back to you for some further detail, and you will be contacted should that be the case. Provided that we are happy with what you've submitted, we should then move on to the second step, which is eligibility status. So once we've reviewed the eligibility bookings, we will then allocate one of 4 statuses to your submission. Initially, it will be pending. If we're happy with the details you provided us, it will say approved. If there is something that we're unhappy about, we will reject it, or it may say action needed. Now, if it does say action needed, there will be some feedback attached to it, and you will be able to click on the button that says action needed, and it will give you some details. It is unlikely, in fact, I've said here, we will not request further evidence for essential skills at this stage, because Qualification Wales had set up centre determined grades as being an acceptable alternative arrangement for essential skills qualifications, unlike qualifications such as ESOL and functional skills, where the process is more stringent. So the next step is back review. Step 3 is internal quality assurance. So your policy must cover the following: all members of staff who are involved in making or reviewing centre-determined judgments must have a common understanding of the essential skills subject content, but they must also have a common understanding of the performance standard that is required for a learner to pass their qualification. And you will need to show that you have undertaken standardization activities regarding the collection of evidence, the review of evidence, and the judgments based on this evidence. And every judgment, each judgment in turn, must be reviewed internally, and that is very much the case. In terms of evidence, we've listed some the sources of suitable evidence in the Alternative Assessment Arrangements Guide. That's the one with the green cover. But to determine the most trusted evidence, you must think about what it is. What is the evidence you're using? For example, if you're using a sample test or a sample task from the City and Guilds website, we would class that as strong evidence because it covers the majority of the subject content. And then another consideration must be how it was generated. So a sample test that has been undertaken under supervision is much stronger evidence than a sample test that you might have emailed to a candidate and they completed it at home, whereby you can't be sure that it is all the learner's own work. That makes it weaker evidence. And where the evidence you're using is learner work that isn't a sample test or task, then that evidence must be mapped across the whole qualification. Oh, something came into my head that I was going to say there, and I can't remember. I'll come back to it. So in terms of standardization, I would say that the pass mark of the sample task is a good indicator of performance, but on its own is probably not enough. It's very important to consider learner responses and the quality of those responses in terms of whether they're meeting the requirements or not. So just because a learner has not passed a sample task or has passed a sample task on the pass mark, that in itself is not enough, and you need to look at the quality of the work. And it is, I would just say again, it is very important that tutors and teachers across the provider or centre standardise their understanding of what a pass would look like. So following the review of evidence, you must hold on to that evidence. So you must retain the evidence for each and every determined grade. You must retain evidence of the standardisation of teacher decisions, and then the evidence of the internal quality assurance, both the processes and any feedback that was generated during that process. The next step will then be, when the results window, submission window opens, is to put the results in. So once we've approved your eligibility booking in walled garden and the window opens, you can put individual results. Now, I've said here individual results can be entered into walled garden. It is true to say that we're struggling with this little bit of the technology at the moment, so it may be that we have to give you an alternative way to give us the grades. At this moment, we intend that you actually submit the grades in walled garden alongside the eligibility booking. But I will tell you that we have experienced this last few days some challenges with that process. We're updating the guidance documents, so they will include a step-by-step instruction with some screenshots to help you. And then I've just listed the results submission dates there. So for essential communication skills and essential application number skills at levels 1, 2 and 3, in addition to submitting your centre determined grade, you also need to claim the results entry component, so the controlled task. So it's important that you do this even though that piece of evidence may not have been generated, or you were using a different piece of evidence for your centre determined grade. You will need to claim this element in order to generate a certificate, and that certificate will be generated when we issue the results of the centre determined grade. So for those three levels of those two qualifications, you do need to take that additional step. So I've talked briefly about internal quality assurance, but we've also got external quality assurance. So this is what Sitting Guilds will be doing. So when you have submitted your centre determined grades, we will be sampling from your evidence. So we will contact you and we will ask for examples of evidence so that we can review them, and we will ask for examples of the standardization activities and a bit more detail around your IQA processes. So we didn't do this at the first stage, we're doing this once you have submitted the results. And then finally, we issue the results in line with the deadlines that are given here. And I must emphasize these deadlines. So wherever possible, we will be issuing the results ahead of this. I think it's probably safe to say that one of the challenges we will experience is that we will need to have completed the EQA process for all essential skills centres before we can start to release results. So that process will have to happen, but the aim is to issue the results as early as possible ahead of these deadlines. So, oh dear, I've just noticed that says tag process. So if you have any further questions about the centre determined grade process, please send them to the fs.quality@cityandguilds.com inbox. I realise that says functional skills, FS, but actually we set up the inbox before we realised that actually it was going to be more efficient to have one inbox with all the queries coming in. So don't be alarmed by the fact that that's called functional skills. if you have a question outside of the centre determined grades process, then our customer services team are always available to support you. So you can email them on centre support, or we have a new phone number that's not an 0800 number now. I'm going to draw breath, you'll be pleased to know, and find out whether you've been typing question. I can see a little question mark in the box, so I'm guessing that I'm going to find some questions. Is that right, Catherine and Anharo?
Yeah, there's just a couple of questions in the question box, Amanda.
And PDF them, and the digital marketing team to get them up. If not today, it'll be early Monday morning. Oh no, wait, Tuesday morning. Sorry, it's bank holiday Monday.
Yeah, bank holiday Monday. Yeah. We're all committed, but just not that much.
Not that much, no.
Right. We need a break. And we've got one from Rebecca. If we submit an eligible learner for window 2, but then they don't provide the required evidence, how do we submit them for window 3?
So if you submit a learner, so you make a booking for a learner and then you don't have the evidence, that really shouldn't happen, because you should only be submitting learners for centre determined grades if you already hold the evidence and that you're confident that they meet the pass standard. If you don't hold the evidence, then you should wait and submit that learner in window 3 or possibly window 4 if that's the case. If you were to submit them for window 2 and then not have the evidence, you would have to put that they failed, and there is a possibility that then you would be charged for that. That fail is in the same way as you would be charged for a pass grade. I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, she's thanked. There you go, Rebecca. Another one, we've got one off Jenny. So just to clarify, we have to submit details of learners before we enter results.
Yes. So what you have to say is you create an eligibility booking, and in that booking you add all the learners for whom you hold the evidence and that you're confident that they can have a centre determined grade, and that you submit alongside the quality processes form, the CPA form, and then we will confirm that you are approved to, or we will confirm whether you're approved to submit the results for those learners in a later stage.
Thank you, Amanda. Just one popped up from Craig. Thank you, Craig. Can you confirm again, at what stage do we need to make a claim on walled garden for the controlled task?
Yes, so this is a bit like latest news. So I wasn't clear until yesterday at what stage that was happening. So I don't think we've shared that information before. So this is new information. When you submit the results for your centre determined grade, that is the point at which you claim the results entry controlled task.
Lovely. And I've got one in my screen's playing up, so I do apologise if I can get this up. So Sally's asking, if a learner achieved controlled task last year and has not been awarded the full qual, under new adaptation, this learner has nor been able to take the exam as evidence for, bear with me, CDG. How can we claim this?
So I'm assuming that we're talking about a learner who's been unable to access the test. So you would need to submit a centre determined grade if you've got the evidence for it. So you would need to list them in an eligibility booking and then submit a result for them based on the evidence that you have. If you claimed the controlled task last year as under the COVID adaptations, I'm just not sure whether that learner shouldn't have been given a partial, awarded on the basis of partial completion. It might be worth, perhaps if that colleague was to email the pre-employment box with details of the learner, a little bit of description of what happened, we could maybe investigate in that case, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's great, thank you. Yes, Sally, so if you send it to pre-employment@sittinggirls.com, we can pick that up for you. Jenny's just asking how quickly we will have feedback. Sorry, I do apologise, my is a bit funny. How quickly we will have feedback or the CPA form?
So you will notice that the eligibility window closes. Sorry, let me try that again. The eligibility booking window closes, and then there's a gap before the results submission is allowed to start. And what will happen from the point at which you submit your eligibility booking and the CPA form, our quality teams are looking at that as on a rolling process, and then they will have had to complete that process before you can then submit results, if that makes sense. I think so. Yes, I think I've said that right.
Sorry, yes, it does. Yeah, and I haven't got any other questions come through.
Okay, that was quite restrained, everybody. Have we worn you out for a Friday afternoon? Is that what it is? I think probably holding time. I think what I might do is leave the webinar running just to allow people time to type any further questions. As I say, we're in the process of just updating the guidance, so there will be an updated version of the adaptations guidance, and there will also be some further guidance for centre determined grades. When I come off this webinar, I'm just going to go and chase that to find out where that is, with the hope that we'll actually get that guidance up in the next day or so. Okay, nothing else coming through?
No, I think you might have covered absolutely everything.
Gosh, well, that would be a first. I'm sure, actually, if you, as everyone reflects on the content of this, and once we've got the slides up, you might have other questions. So please do come back to us. I think just remains for me to say thank you very much for joining me this afternoon, and have a lovely weekend. I'm going to leave the webinar running for a further 5 minutes or so, just in case you have some last-minute questions. I'm going to put myself on mute, so thank you very much.